Good evening. Here we are for our studies in the Old Testament. 1 Samuel chapter 23. David's on the run from Saul, hiding in the wilderness. So that's where we pick up here, 23:1, 1 Samuel. Then they told David, saying, somebody come and told David, said, behold, the Philistines fight against a little town called Keilah. And they're robbing the threshing floors. Now, remember, to rob the threshing floors means they were stealing their grain that they would need to be dependent upon to keep them and their stock through the winter. So this is a really big thing. Therefore, David inquired of the Lord. David inquired of the Lord. That means David prayed about it, right? Saying to the Lord, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah, this little region around here. So war is not God's perfect will, but in a fallen world, sometimes we have to have the lesser evil stop the bigger evil. So war's bad, but yeah, you can't just let them take all their grain and kill people and everybody starve to death over there. So David, you go and you come to battle against, we're going to have a war against them Philistines. So David's men said to him, verse 3, behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? We've got enough to worry about with Saul chasing us. Now you want to get us in a battle with the Philistines? So David inquired of the Lord yet again. He went back and prayed again. Said, he's praying, Lord, my men don't want to go. So is this really, am I reading this right? And the Lord answered him and said, arise and go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hand. You're going to win, just go. So David and his men went to Keilah, and they fought with the Philistines. And they brought away their cattle. They took the Philistines' cattle away from them. And I'm sure they got the grain back, and they smote them with a great slaughter. And David saved the inhabitants of Keilah that way. And it came to pass when Abiathar, remember he was the priest's son, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. So Abiathar's come and joined up with David. This sort of a side note. I think it may have to do with the next few verses. David's going to ask the Lord a lot of questions. And the ephod, the priestly garments, also contained the Urim and the Thummim, those mysterious stones. And the best I've been able to study on the Urim and the Thummim over the years is back during the days of the tabernacle, they had the Urim and the Thummim, which was two stones. And basically one side had like a yes, and the other side had like a no. And when they would inquire of the Lord, they would roll these stones, and if they needing an answer from the Lord, they got two yeses, they knew God was in that. If they got two no's, I mean, they knew God was telling them that. Sometimes they got a yes and a no, they still didn't know what to do. And that may be how David discerned some things of the Lord in this later. Now, this was God's idea. This is actually God working through these strange things back in the Old Testament. Today, we just pray and we have to discern what God's telling us. So, verse 7, it was told Saul, somebody's telling on David again. They're telling King Saul that David was come to Keilah, and Saul said, God's delivered him into my hand, for he's shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. If he's in that town, we'll go down there right now with my army, and we'll besiege the city, and we've got him. So Saul called all the people to war, to go down to Keilah, to besiege David and his men. Got 600 men of David's in there, the soldiers. And David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief or privately planned evil against him. And he said to Abiathar the priest, bring hither the ephod. Bring me the ephod. So David's beginning now, he's going to start asking the Lord questions and looking for the answer in the ephod, the Urim and the Thummim. So, O Lord, that said David, he's going to pray against it. O Lord God of Israel, verse 10, thy servant hath certainly heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. And he asked God, verse 11, he says, will the men of Keilah deliver me into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, yes, he will come down. Then said David, well, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, yes, they will deliver thee up. Which makes you wonder, he's just saved their city and he's the hero, but now they're afraid of Saul, see? So they're going to betray him. So verse 13, then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah. They said, we better get out of here before he gets here. And he went whithersoever they could go. They went other places to hide. And it was told Saul, there's a lot of tattletales running around on David, ain't there, that David was escaped from Keilah. And so Saul didn't go. He forbore to go forth. And David abode in the wilderness in strongholds. He got back in the woods and the rocks and places that was easy to protect and hard to find him. Strongholds. And he remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph, the region of Ziph now. And Saul sought him every day. He couldn't find him, but God delivered him not into his hand. In verse 15, David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a wood, or in the woods. And Jonathan, remember Jonathan and David's like that, but Jonathan's Saul's son. They've got a covenant together. They're going to be friends for life, and they made a covenant before the Lord. So he finds David again. Jonathan, Saul's son, arose, and he went to David into the wood, and he strengthened his hand in God. He encouraged David by strengthening him in what God's will was in his life. And Jonathan said to him, he said unto him, verse 17, fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find thee, and thou shalt be king over Israel. You're going to take over the throne, David. And Jonathan said, and I'll be next to you. And that also Saul, my father, knows. He knows that's God's will. That's why he's wanting to kill you. He don't accept God's will. And they two made a covenant before the Lord, and David abode in the woods, and Jonathan went back to his house. And then came up the Ziphites, the people who lived in this region of Ziph. They came to Saul. And they're going to tell on David too, saying, doth not David hide himself with us in the strongholds in the wood in the hill of Hachilah, which is the south of Jeshimon? We know exactly where he's at. He's down there among us. Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part will be to deliver him into the king's hand. Now, I don't know, maybe they're trying to curry favor with the king, right? But they're against David. You come down there, we'll find him, we'll tell you where he's at. And Saul said, blessed be ye of the Lord, for you have compassion of. I've got some friends left. 22, go, I pray you, prepare yet know and see his place, where his haunt is. Where his haunt is, we'd say where his hangout or where his hideout is. Let me know where it's at. And who hath seen him there? For it's told me that he deals very subtly. Or Saul said that David, he's a sneaky one. So therefore, and take knowledge of all the lurking places, all the places that he can hide, all them lurking places where he hides himself. And come ye again to me with the certainty, and I'll go with you. And it'll come to pass, if he be in the land, I'll search him throughout all the thousands of Judah. If I have to look at every little town and community in the land of Judah, all the thousands, I'm going to find him. And they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. But David and his men, they were in the wilderness of Maon. They've shifted a little bit now, in the plain south of Jeshimon. And Saul also and his men went to seek him, and they told David. Somebody told David, Saul's coming. Wherefore he came down into a rock. So David finds a rock, a big rocky cliff, I guess. And he abode in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. So he's hot on his trail. And Saul went on this side of the mountain, and David was on the other side of the mountain and his men. And David made haste to get away for fear of Saul. He tried to run, for Saul and his men were compassing them or encircling them around. And David and his men round about to take them. But there came a messenger to Saul, saying, haste thee and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land. So just when Saul has just about got David surrounded, he gets word from back home, says, you got to get back home with the army quick. The Philistines have invaded our land. So Saul has to turn and leave, wherefore Saul returned. And the only way to look at this is, just perfect timing. That was God's timing. That was a God thing. It was the providence of God. Saul was just about to catch David and his men, And God saw to it that, hey, you better get home, because he let the Philistines come in and invade up there. You ever have things like that happen to you? I have a lot of times. Several times in my life, I've got started somewhere and got down on the road and thought, did I turn something off at the house? And I'll turn around and go back and be aggravated about it. And yes, I've always turned it off, but I came back and checked. Then I get started going to where I was at and come across a big bad wreck somewhere down the road somewhere. And often I've thought, if I hadn't have got that on my mind to go back and check, that could have been me in that car wreck. You never know how the little providences of God are watching over us, do we? Wherefore Saul returned from pursuing after David, and he went again to the Philistines, had to go do battle with them. Wherefore they called that place Selah Hamalikoth, or it has something to do with David being saved, I guess. And David went up from thence. And the next place he lives, he dwells for a while in the strongholds at En-gedi, which were an interesting place. It was, I read that En-gedi was a place about 600 feet above the Dead Sea, where there was a big stream just gushing out of the rock up there. And everything else around there was just an arid, dry wilderness, but where the spring of En-gedi comes out of the rock, it was all kinds of tropical plants. It was an oasis in the middle of a big, bad wilderness and a salty Dead Sea down there below. It's still there today. I've read that it's a great tourist attraction. People want to go and see that place, but it's still there. And if you ever get to go see there, remember that's where David hid for a while from King Saul. We'll see you next week, chapter 24.